right, it's time for the final lesson in our unit on retouch tools. And we're going to go with this picture here, the one that had Harry Potter on the bottom layer. Be sure to click on the top layer, and we're going to deal with something that's pretty common whenever it comes to dealing with hair, and that is hairs that are all over the place. So we're going to look at ways that we can fix that using our tools. We're going to do this on a new layer because we can do this on a new layer. So let's make a new layer. We're going to call it Fix Hair. And we're going to be basically just using the healing brush and the clone stamp because those are the two that allow us to press Alt and choose an area from which to sample those pixels. We're going to basically rebuild the top of this picture. That's one good thing about pictures that have really blurry backgrounds is that you can easily do this technique, and it makes it really easy to get rid of these wisps of hair. So let's start off with, again, make sure you make a new layer and that you're clicked on the new layer. It doesn't matter which program that you are in, but we need the healing brush tool for starters. Actually, let's start with the clone stamp because then I'll show you why we would switch to the healing because that'll make more sense. All right, so let's go to the clone stamp. And then up here at the top, be sure you are set to sample either current and below or all layers. I'm going to turn off Harry Potter down here. So that way we're not sampling an empty layer because we're on an empty layer. Okay, so over here, notice that most of this is kind of the same lighting, you might say. I'll zoom up a little closer. So I could use a very soft, remember it does need to be soft, so I've got my brush turned down. I'll turn it down a little bit more, 14% here. I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to click over here where it's good. And then I'm going to come over here, and notice if you look at my brush, see, it's real soft. So we're only seeing that in the middle. And I'm just going to kind of paint over here in some of these areas where those hairs are. Now, do you see how there's like a black thing going on there? That's because I use the clone stamp. If I Control-Alt-Z a couple times, see how I get rid of that? So this is how you might know, man, I need to not use clone stamp because clone stamp's just copying and pasting it. Healing brush is going to fix it, right? So let's switch to the healing brush and do the same thing. I'm going to hold down Alt, come over here, and then come over here close to the hair. Okay, Alt, come over here, Alt. I like to vary where I click. Now, look, we're getting too close to the hair, and look what's happening now. This thing's happening, and I'm going to turn this off so you can see. Okay, so there's a little bit getting in here, so we need to be careful. Or, remember what I talked about, we can set an area. So I could say, don't mess with any of these pixels in here. Okay, let's say this is our big area. Don't mess with any of those pixels. So now I can hold down Alt. Let me go back to my tool. I'll just go down here somewhere. And then I'll paint in here. Now, we got an issue here. Look. It scooted out from there, and now we're getting the darkness from the hair. So I'm going to Control-Alt-Z. So this is where now you have to really go through and start considering, how do I fix it? And so this is where you have to go back and forth. So whereas maybe in the beginning it helped, not necessarily. So I'm going to hit Alt again. We'll try it again with our clone stamp, but being very careful because we know that we're going to get into the hair, but it doesn't matter because we don't have that hair selected. See that? Now, it may not completely match on the color, but that's okay. Okay, so I fixed those edges, right? Now I'm going to Control-D. Edges are a little rough, but now I can come in here with my healing brush. So now I can Alt, and I'm just not going to get close to the head. Alt, we can kind of use that, and then it's going to help those colors a little bit. Okay. Now up here, I'll go the other direction. I'll come up here where there's some of this prettiness, right? So if I come here and click on this bright flower, and then come down here and try to paint, for instance, it's not going to paint bright. Isn't that neat? It won't because that area of the picture wasn't bright. So I'm going to come back and click on that bright one and come in here again and see it's not painting bright because it's a healing brush. If it was the clone stamp, it would paint bright. Okay. Then up here, let's say maybe I'll take some of these more pale areas and I'll just paint in here a little bit to get rid of some of these here. And then I'll come up here and Alt click. I just move around where I'm Alt clicking from. I don't want to Alt click from the same spot all the time. There we go. It looks pretty good. Let's zoom out. Yeah, see, definitely fix those wisps of hair over on that side of her head. And this takes practice. I mean, you kind of have to mess with it a lot. And I've just done it a lot, so it's not too complicated anymore. Okay, so again, Alt, click somewhere, and then you can just drag there. And if you're using that healing brush, it'll keep the lights in the dark areas so you don't have to worry about it if you accidentally are in an area that's not really the same lightness. Okay, there we go. And that mostly fixed that. Now, she actually has a lot of places that you could fix. For instance, there's a piece of hair that just goes right smack in the front of her face. But that one I would probably use the spot healing brush for and just zip through here. There's also some pieces of hair through here. Just for the sake of time, we're not going to watch me do that. But there's that one. Okay. And then just let's review a few of the other items while we have this picture open. What would we do if we wanted to lighten up her teeth? If you recall, we would first go to the sponge tool and desaturate a little bit. You can turn that flow down a little bit or up a little bit, whatever you want it to be. Desaturate, remember, gets rid of color. So as we go through here, it'll get rid of some of the yellow that exists. It's not on mine because I'm clicked on the wrong layer. So let's click on the right layer. There we go. Now it's doing it. By the way, always check what layer you're on because it happens all the time. Okay, there. Now that looks better. And now I can come up here, switch to my dodge tool, which is lightning tool. Make sure it's soft so you're not going to mess anything up around it. And there we go. I might should turn my flow down. My flow's a little hot there, but okay. All right. There we go. Looks pretty good. Again, you don't want to do too much. You don't want to make it too crazy. Some people like to lighten up eyes too. You know, I could come up here and dodge the eye just a little bit, brighten those eyes up a bit. That looks good. You could even add some sort of fake highlights, so to speak, up in here by using your dodge tool. Or the opposite. I could take the burn tool. Let's do that just because we haven't really used the burn tool. And then I could burn down here. Now I'm going to turn my exposure down a lot. I'm going to turn it down like 27% or something. But now, as I go through here, see how we're lightening those or darkening those? Because it's the burn tool. Okay? There we go. Yeah. Okay, and I could use a smaller brush so it would be less noticeable. Oops, I got into her shirt. That probably wasn't the best situation, but there you go. Just kind of stay straight the way the hair is. There we go. All right. Great. And so we could use dodge, we could use burn, we've used sponge already on this one. I never really have a great thing for blur, but on this picture there is a blurry background area. So if there were some areas that maybe we thought could be better blended, like maybe here, I could take that blur tool and just paint with a blurry brush, kind of get rid of some of those pixels there. There we go. That's better. Sharpen if you had an area that you felt like you needed to increase the contrast on. Smudge, like I said, unless you just want to go paint around up here in these little areas, I probably wouldn't use that smudge tool. But in a nutshell, we've kind of revisited most of the tools that we've used here in this lesson on this one. And then remember, you can always go in and use the patch tool. We'll remove one of these leaves or whatever's in the road here. So again, patch tool is destructive. You have to do it on this layer. But I can take and drag around the object to be removed. I might not have got the whole thing. Point to the middle and scoot over here where it's good and let go. And remember, it does blend, so you don't have to worry about it. Yeah, looks good. I could go do that down here. I'm kind of afraid to try that one. Nope, that looked pretty good too. But anyway, we can continue on removing some additional things from the picture. But I want you to play with the picture a little bit just to see if you can fix some of those hair issues. If you found, like, if there was a place where somebody's pores were really coming through, you could do a little light blur brush. You just really mess with those numbers, those little exposure numbers and strength numbers on those tools as you're using them. So to recap, my big tips. Number one, just because you can doesn't mean you should, okay? So just because we have a burn tool doesn't mean we need to go burning everything. People get excited about the burn tool because it is kind of interesting at times. For instance, let me sit here on old Harry Potter. If I put my burn tool on here and I burn long enough, I'm going to give him a black eye. Look. Now Harry Potter is damaged. So again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Because what just happened? I burned the pixels, and now notice the pixels look kind of a bit of a hot mess, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Two, there may be a better non-destructive way to do something where you can use a smart object. So if I really did want to darken part of Harry Potter's face, maybe I should use a levels adjustment and paint on a mask instead of using the burn tool. You just have to decide what's the right tool for the moment. 3, remember that you can pre-select areas to help with tough matches. So if I'm trying to take care of something on somebody's chin, like their chin line, a neckline or something like that, or like around the edges of the hair, I may need to make a selection first so I don't mess up, I don't smear into that hair area. So you can pre-select areas for any tough matches or tough edges. And then finally, pay attention to the settings up here on the options bar at the top. Whenever you're using these specific tools, mostly like the blur, sharpen, smudge, dodge, all of those, really watch the exposure and the strength. Otherwise, the tools are not going to work like you expected. It's always easier to start with a lower number and then pop it up if needed. So those are my tips for working with Retouch. I look forward to seeing what you come up with next.